what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, you are back. Happy football week. We are in a football week.
Yes,
kind
sir.
of, sort of, not really, but I think it still counts.
Yeah, we are. I literally texted you last night. I was like, oh my gosh, we made it. And that's probably way more logical. Like you've probably been thinking that for weeks and getting antsy. For me, we just had WNBA kickoff again. So I looked up, but I was like, oh, we're here. Oh my goodness, which is great. It's all working out. It's all going according to plan,
Week 0, I'm not going to say the slate is thin. But yeah, it's thin. It's not the, we've talked about this in the past. Week 0 is not the clear everything on your schedule sort of day, the way that it sets up. Watch Georgia Tech and Florida State and Ireland. Maybe you're going to catch little SMU Nevada that night at 8 o'clock or something like that. But, don't build your entire day around week 0 or else you'll be disappointed. Just appreciate the fact that we have live American college tackle football on our televisions, and we will not complain about it. We will not overreact to it whatsoever. I will not say a million times during this game, Haynes King still got it, never sold my stock. I will not say that. We will just treat it for what it is, and that is probably a sporting event in Dublin in which they will run out of beer again. I feel confident about that.
And I'll say too, I think you're kind of in a unique position as a Bears fan because their preseason games do legitimately matter. But I'm just at a place in my life where the NFL preseason starts. I'm just like, okay. The concept of me sitting down and watching 4 quarters of a preseason NFL game, it's never been something I've really done. But at this point in my life, I'm just like, why is this even on? I don't know. I get that people want to watch stuff. And again, a Caleb Williams, you're going to want to see that. But there's no reason why I need to watch the Stinky Saints right now. So it feels like they're like, oh, football season's technically already started. No, this football season starts this week. I'm fired up.
Officially this week, this Saturday. We have great show coming up. We don't have an interview today because I realized we are overdue for a draft. Will, amidst my travel issues that happened in Chicago, we did not have a draft on the first Thursday of the month. So here's what we're going to do. It is the final draft of the calendar year. We're going to save drafts for just off-season type stuff because obviously in season we have more than enough to be able to discuss and to break down. But I thought we would do one last draft and we would do something that's we've kind of danced around it a little bit but never gone directly at this subject. We are drafting non-quarterbacks to win the 2024 Heisman Trophy, a concept that others have probably done, but have others done it as well as we have? Decidedly no, definitely not. So that's what we're going to do today. Just a fun, interesting exercise because we all know the Heisman has become a quarterback award in pretty much every way in the 21st century, at least. The only non-quarterbacks to win a Heisman Trophy in the 21st century: Reggie Bush 2005, Mark Ingram 2009, Derrick Henry 2015, and Devontae Smith in 2020. And we're coming off of, at that time, a 90s decade in which 6 of the 10 winners were non-quarterbacks. In the 80s, 7 of the 10 winners were non-quarterbacks. And if you can possibly believe it, if you're old enough to remember this time, I personally am not, you personally are not, but the 70s closed with 8 consecutive non-quarterbacks winning the Heisman Trophy. From 1972 to 1983, we had 0, I repeat, 0 quarterbacks win the Heisman Trophy until a certain 5'6" Doug Flutie ended that. Different times. Yeah. Very, very different times than now.
Yeah, I think that was the only 2-time Heisman winner as well was in that range. They just could not stop valuing running backs. They were like, please, the most valuable players in the world are running backs. And I was just like,
Different game. Different game, different rules. Totally get it. The sport has changed. The world has changed in the way that we can consume the sport. And that is obviously why the Heisman Trophy, and I think the voting, some of it is very narrative driven, but also we have more access to guys. And there is a kind of a different understanding for how to evaluate. And maybe that means there's a different understanding for how to evaluate other positions. We do at least have some chance of a non-quarterback winning the award. Some chance. Small, but some. 21st Century says that every 4 to 6 years, we're going to get a non-quarterback to be able to win the Heisman Trophy. It's been 4 years since Devontae Smith won the award in 2020. That means that we're due. That's all that means. Or at least we're in the due stretch of this 4 to 6 year window, whatever that is. But let's just pretend like that's actually the case. And I looked this up on DraftKings because I'm sure you're thinking at home, Connor, what are the odds on these non-quarterbacks to be able to win the Heisman Trophy? The top 21 guys in terms of the odds on DraftKings, quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
We're acknowledging these are long shots. These really are. But if you just want to say, you know what, I don't really want to put it on a quarterback. I want to go with a non quarterback to win the Heisman Trophy, something a little bit different to be able to follow, something different to kind of root for. Then here, this is going to be a great hour of podcasting for you to be able to understand where your money is going towards. There are obvious historical hurdles for all of these guys as non-quarterbacks. Some of which may be more relevant than others with some of the information that we'll provide here. But just think about this, Will.
Mm-hmm.
Evan Stewart and AJ Swan have the same odds at 150 to 1.
Yep.
Look,
no notes there. That seems like an accurate. Yep.
I like AJ Swan. Jaden Ott and Ty Simpson have the same odds. Marcus Carroll, the guy that I said, look, hey, CJ Baxter, he's not healthy anymore. He can't lead the SEC in rushing. Maybe Marcus Carroll will do it. He and Walker Howard, not Will Howard, but Walker Howard is in the backup for Ole Miss. Those guys have the same Heisman Trophy odds. Dart throws. These are dart throws. We'll have some fun with it. We'll kind of talk some of this stuff through because maybe it's something that people are going to be wondering about in a couple of months as to how likely this is or what this path could look like.
Yeah, and just to do one note of cleanup here, the final score for this will more or less be the final Heisman standings. It would make no sense for me. I think Parker Brailsford, I'm going to name my own MVP. I think he would just shore up my offensive line. That would not be a good pick.
It'd be terrible. If it were 1958, that'd be a really nice pick.
Right.
But, probably not going to move the needle quite as much. So yeah, that's probably the way that we can actually grade this. And we're still going to put the poll out on Saturday Down South podcast. Somebody suggested this to me, and I need to actually listen to this. I'll make the poll last longer than just 24 hours in case you're one of these people maybe you're listening to this on Wednesday and then you go to be able to vote on this or something like that. And oh my gosh, the voting's already come and gone. So I will make this voting last a little bit longer. We'll see. Maybe I'll even do it for 7 days. I don't even know if you can do it, but I'll make it so that it's not just within the first 24 hours that the poll goes up. So, Will, all important question. First pick or second two?
I think I'm going to take second two here. Okay. Yeah, because I don't think there's a standout, but if you pick a certain guy, it might be bad. So we'll see.
I see. I was hoping you were going to say that. I was really hoping you were going to say that because to me, there is an obvious 1-1, and I'm just going to go ahead and take Travis Hunter. I'll take Travis Hunter. To me, you can hate all things Deion and still acknowledge that what Travis Hunter is doing is absolutely awesome. The guy had at least 70 receiving yards in 7 of 9 games last year. He had 300-yard games. All right, kind of take that for what it is. That's not historic receiving production. But think about this. He missed 3.5 games due to injury. He took that cheap shot, whatever that was. They had the whole heart-to-heart thing after you saw all that stuff. Colorado missed a bowl game, so he didn't even get the benefit of the 13th game, of course. And he was still the FBS leader in scrimmage snaps played. The man played 145 snaps in his Colorado debut. And when he came back from injury, I think Deion's like, you know what? We're going to ease Travis Hunter back into this, see how he feels. Played 157 snaps in his first game back from injury. It's almost like when you watch an old baseball movie and you're like, I don't know if they're going to leave him out there. He's already thrown 150 pitches.
Yeah.
That's Travis Hunter. In modern day, the year of our Lord 2024, he will be doing things like this. He averaged 116 snaps a game, which is actually sort of skewed by the 70 that he played in the game that he got hurt. In his healthy 8 games, he had 122 snaps per game. He's a lockdown outside corner. The PFF grade is never going to be great because of the volume he's asked to play. Yeah, the guy probably takes a few plays off here and there to catch his breath. I don't really blame him for that. I know PFF probably will, whatever. Playing both ways in a full-time role, cornerback and receiver, is such a throwback move that gets the attention, it gets the respect of these older voters, which we talk about, that's kind of the key, demographic and stuff like that. I'm not going to include myself in the older voters. I'm part of the younger demographic, a young buck of 34. But I think it's one of those things that can actually overcome how good your team is, right? Because the obvious hurdle with Travis Hunter is that he very likely will not be playing on a Colorado team that's going to go to the college football playoff. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
like we can all agree on that. All four of the non-quarterback Heisman winners of the 21st century that I mentioned before, they all played on teams that were about to play in a national championship. The last time that a non-quarterback won the award without that on the table at all was 1999 Ron Dane, who won that very much as like a lifetime achievement type
Mm-hmm.
award. Probably should have won it as a freshman. Wisconsin was still going to the Rose Bowl as the top 4 team, basically like 2015 Christian McCaffrey. Even the late Rashawn Salam, another Colorado guy, that's
Mm-hmm.
Colorado's lone Heisman winner, was part of a top 4 team when he won it. Side note, I did a really depressing thing, which no fan, we were talking about the NFL before, don't ever do this. It's just going to make you mad if you're the fan of an NFL or an NBA team. I went back and looked at the draft in which the Bears got Rashawn Salam in the first round in 1995. They took him 21 overall, 7 spots ahead of Derek Brooks. And then the Bears, just in an ultimate Bears fashion, took punter Todd Sauerbrunn in the second round in a draft that had future Hall of Fame running backs, Curtis Martin and Terrell Davis, both going later. Shout out Georgia.
Yep.
Don't do that. Not worth your time. I did it. Anyway, Travis Hunter's hurdle, it might be thrown out the window from a team standpoint with Colorado having just such a low bar for success. If like they go 6-6 and he's doing these things for a full year, he's going to have a chance. His biggest hurdle might actually be playing every single game and staying healthy, because the stat that I like to bring up, in the last 40 years, Charlie Ward is the only Heisman winner who missed a game against Power 5 competition. There's got to be on the field. Can't have like 3.5 games where he's just not out there. So Travis Hunter to me is an easy 1-1 in this discussion.
So this is fascinating because I had him third. He is a space behind the guy that I was 2 spaces behind the guy I was worried about. I'll tell you why. If Travis Hunter goes to practice tomorrow and Dion MFs him and he just does not play for Colorado again, where do you think he goes in the draft?
That scenario feels so unlikely, Will. After the
what about Colorado feels likely?
Fair. We've kind of been programmed to just accept anything that comes with this. Travis Hunter's been in such lockstep with Dion, though. Like from going back to the Jackson State stuff, obviously that's a big part of like his how atypical of a path that was. Like how all in he was with the idea of just playing for Dion, to be willing to go to an HBCU as the number 1 overall recruit. Whatever the odds are on that, that's intriguing. That's really intriguing. That would be a path, I guess, but I wouldn't say that's a likely thing to happen.
So now let's take it. Okay, so you're saying if he misses 1 game, the odds drop dramatically. Last year, he got targeted because of the words that Dion said. I think that's pretty much a fact, right?
Yeah,
when you see the Colorado. Okay, that happens one more time, I'm here to tell you right now, he's not playing for Colorado again. If that happens to him in week 4 and he gets targeted to the point where he can't play football, he will not be suiting up for Colorado again. So him playing all of those snaps last year cemented his place that he's a good enough team player to deal with Dion every day. And we're getting to a point where Dion's evaluation of a player's character is almost taken as a negative. So all Dion's leverage is to just MF him to scouts, and they don't care.
Why would Dion MF him to scouts if he's
going to be? Because he's Dion.
But he's like, he wants him to be a first-round pick. Like, that's such a big part of this stuff. He's not going to MF him to scouts when he has so much riding on.
And you would think he wouldn't be doing that to a backup receiver on his team. I understand that. I'm just saying.
His backup receiver's not going to be a first-round pick.
Right.
Travis Hunter
No.
Can make Dion a lot
that
of
even
money
further proves my point, though. Because what can he do? If he can't MF him, he can't do nothing to keep him on this team. Because at the end of the day, Travis Hunter is an NFL player, right? He's already proven that. So every snap he plays for Deion Sanders on a bad team is a charity at this point because of the specific kind of hit that he took against Colorado State, which could have, in theory, taken him out for the year, maybe even, I don't want to be Mr. Dramatic, could have ended his career. If you have guys launching themselves headfirst at you on the sidelines and you're playing 2 ways, he just has no shot of leading the nation in snaps again. So it's very similar to the Shedeur Sanders thing that we talked about with the quarterback thing. Okay, can he get hurt? Can he miss games? Well, Shedeur he has a lot more writing on Deion's relationship than Travis Hunter. Travis, to your point, Travis Hunter going in the first round is a priority for Deion. So if he checks out, the best thing Deion can do is be on his good side. So yeah, I think that if I can watch Jamar Chase be like, hey, you know what, guys? I love LSU. I'm going to keep doing LSU stuff. I'm going to go 5th overall. I'm out of here. And I'm only playing wide receiver. This guy has played 2 ways. He's taken the big hits. He's done all that. So as a talent, he might be the most talented player in college football. But in terms of you've hit on it, it's not a good team. So they're not going to get those looks. If it's not a good team, why is he playing in week 10? What does that do for him? If guys are going to check out of bowl games, this guy has no reason to play for Colorado and deal with all the nonsense that is, because the longer you hang out with Colorado, the more you're starting to get like other tags of like, so why did you just do that? Like, why did you just not focus on your NFL career?
It's possible. He could also get to like week 7, week 8 and hear people talking about him in that regard and like what his college legacy is. And he could say to himself, yeah, I mean, we might not be doing anything this year. Maybe we're going to go 4-8 or something like that again. But it's pretty cool to be talked about in this regard. And maybe I do have a chance to be able to get to New York and compete for a Heisman Trophy or something like that. I don't know. Like I would like the health thing is legitimate, like Colorado team success, like all that stuff. Like him falling out of favor with Deion, I don't know if I could see that. Like as much as Deion is just
dealing
such a
with
wild card.
Deion. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine being the star of Deion's team right now, where people are just hitting you up on Twitter, like, what is going on, dude? Like, that's just an extra job he has to do as PR for Deion Sanders right now.
Fair. All right, so who were the 2 guys that you had ahead of him? Because I assume that's who you're about to take right now.
Oh, I'll get there. So and they're in any order. I think we'll start with, you know what? We'll start here. Luther Burden.
Okay, I had Luther at 3rd, so I guess we had Luther Burden and Travis Hunter flip flopped.
Yes, and so this is the guy who's like, because he could have truly like an all-time great receiver season. I think he is head and shoulders above in terms of, we've talked about it, right? In terms of the situation he's in, coach's trust, losing some of that leadership, but keeping his quarterback, losing the defensive coordinator, so they have to throw the ball more. I fully am there, with like Marcus Carroll, and they're going to try to run the ball. But if your defense is getting gassed the way it was pre-Blake Baker, you don't have that option. You really got to go sling that thing. They got that boy Weiss, they got some other options. But at the same time, this is a guy who, it's a new story, and I think that people love that in college football. I think people love the concept that this is something we've never seen before. Can Mizzou win, their first Heisman? Can they get a Biletnikoff Award? Can they do these things that they haven't done before? Now, following up that campaign. So I think he's a good enough shot to return, like in terms of be one of the last 4. I think he has the best odds of any player because his name is already out there. He's playing in the SEC. His success is not tied to making the playoff. I think that he is so insulated with the fact that he has, like, every game he plays in could be a Heisman moment. I mean, everything. If we were last year going, okay, let's find the Heisman moments for him last year, there would be 5 or 6 I could just point to, where you're just like, oh, wow, he flipped this game. He was able to get that touchdown against Georgia. That stuff is already in the barn, and what's ahead of him are expectations that are manageable versus, we already talked about Ja'Marr Chase coming back and be like, I'm out of these expectations. I'm chasing the SEC records. I don't care. Luther Burden isn't probably going to, break like a, Devontae Smith style record, but he doesn't need to. That's the best part, is that to win the Heisman at like Alabama as a receiver, you got to be the best receiver statistically ever. To get there at Mizzou, you just got to hang out. Like, they had Chase Daniel and his backup were getting like Sports Illustrated. Wow, sucks that I don't remember their name anymore. Sports Illustrated covers for just being solid, so I think that's the cool thing about Mizzou is where their expectations are right now, which is that if they stay kind of like where expectations are, he's gonna probably get an invite.
The path for Luther Burden, some might wonder, well, what's his upside? I thought last year in the final month of the season, I thought he was kind of banged up. I didn't think he looked like this. I didn't think he had that same type of burst that he had in the first half of the year. If you go back to what he was doing the first half of the year, man, the numbers were absolutely insane. Like, he was averaging something. What was he averaging? I think he was averaging like 132. So he was on pace for a 1,600-yard season after the first 6 games.
That's great in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. And that's 12 games. When we talk about 12 games, because obviously that's pre-Heisman, you're not voting on Heisman after bowl games. But one of the points that you brought up in the pod that we did, just giving Luther Burden his flowers a few months ago when he wasn't going to be one of the cover guys for College Football 25. And it's such a great point, and I've thought about it a lot since then. Mizzou went from this panic level, his true freshman season, of we need to find all these unique ways to be able to get him the football because it's a little bit more difficult than we thought to just line him up on the outside, tell him to get separation against SEC defenses. And they kind of struggled with that and what all that looks like. And they experimented with a bunch of different things. And what they did his sophomore year with Kirby Moore was say, just line up in the slot and win matchups. Just do that. You do that, get on the same page as Brady Cook, develop that rapport with him, and it's going to work out. And you're going to be awesome because you're really good. And you do so many things well that we're not worried about all the other things that you can and can't do. Just do that and you'll be great. And he was. And that to me is so encouraging for him moving forward because I think he can take on more. And I think he will find that that balance, I think, between what he was asked to do his freshman year and what he was asked to do his sophomore year. He's going to line up more on the outside. He played 82% of his snaps in the slot. I don't think that's going to increase for him in his pre-draft season. I think it will get closer to a 50-50 split. But yeah, I mean, you bring up another good point about the wide receiver stuff. Like, what are you competing against? Are you competing against your own school, or are you competing against the Devontae Smith standard as the guy who won the award as a receiver in the 21st century? Because Devontae averaged 149 receiving yards per game in 2020. Since then, think about it. I mean, that's truly insane. It really is. Since then, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Malik Neighbors were the only Power 5 receivers to average 120 receiving yards in a game. In the 3 years before that, Jamar Chase was the only other Power 5 guy to average 120 receiving yards per game. So in addition to, like, what are you competing against, are we also just looking at 2020 as the COVID season? And because I'm not trying to diminish what Devontae Smith did. It was ridiculous. He did it against SEC-only competition. But is there also an element to a number like that makes us go, you know what? It was kind of weird with the defenses he was playing against with COVID, and maybe that's not held to the same standard. We talk about that with, like, the team scoring numbers and stuff all the time. So maybe that's part of it and worth remembering with receivers. But look, I don't hate Luther Burden. Luther Burden was going to be one of the first 3 picks of this. So I don't hate it at all. I am surprised you had him at first on your board, though. Very impressive.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. A great point about the slot stuff. I think that was one thing that whenever I actually asked him that question at media day, and he was talking about, he has to prove that he could be that big time receiver on the outside in the NFL. But think about that. It's like, even if he does expand his game, it's like, who's the third DB on regular teams that is just comfortable covering Luther Burden in the slot? Because your number one corner that wants to go make money, like Travis Hunter, will never be covering this guy because he's in the slot, and you have to have such quick twitch muscles. And usually you start off as nickel and you kind of get moved outside, or it's just a different skill set. And so if they just have him feasting on linebackers and nickels and kind of a 5 DB set, that's it. And then furthermore, now he's getting comfortable going outside to where it's like, okay, we kind of got an answer. Oh no, this guy hasn't even seen him all game. He's been hanging out with Weiss getting cooked over there. So yeah, I think that's a big deal. And to your point, I love the McNeighbors point because he had the best stats last year, but he was compared to Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, 2019 LSU, right? Whereas there was this cool story of Marvin Harrison Jr. He did win the Politikoff Award, and you just said he had stats that were second only to Chase and Devontae Smith in SEC history, right? So that's the deal. You're not being compared to I don't know, maybe Chase Kaufman or something at Mizzou, but I don't know who the Mizzou receiver that's really, really up there in terms of all-time great. So yeah, I think he's forging his own path, and that's great.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what a pre-draft Luther Burden looks like. STP, that was what I couldn't remember during our media days pod that he kept saying, and I think he said it to me 2 different times when I asked him about his college football 25 ranking. Something to prove. That's the mantra that I forgot and then remembered very shortly thereafter.
It's like elevated link. Okay. Anyway, like that.
Staying away from that one.
Yeah, no, I know. And so they got a documentary now. Anyway, so I think that we can kind of go into all the things we've talked about. Like I said, there were 3 at the top. Ollie Gordon, number 3. He is stand alone, in my opinion, as a running back. And we've seen if a guy can crack this top 4, it's usually a really weird case or it's a running back. It's not that weird for running backs to get the invite. I think that if we talk about coaches' trust in an athlete, I don't necessarily want to give Gundy the Phil Jackson tag of being I'm going to take all the heat off of him for this arrest. I don't think he's playing that level of 4D chess. I will say his first instinct was to be I'm actually not too worried about this. And I think that's a really big deal considering that Gundy is an old school coach, and those guys often will use moments like that to, defend their players or to kind of prove a point. But he's still the guy a little bit who's got the, I'm a man, I'm 40. That was crazier when he was talking about blood alcohol content than the I'm a man thing. And so point being, he's already gone out of line, right? He's already gone out of his way, to kind of endear himself to Ollie Gordon. So I think Ollie Gordon appreciates that because that's a legitimate question. When you're coming from a place like Oklahoma State, it's a smaller school. Is this guy have quote unquote off the field issues? Well, his coach has already stood up for him, taken the flack off of him. So I think when you do that, there's a little bit of this handshake of you will be getting these carries again. If I'm going to do this for you, you are going to be getting these carries. You are going to be the star of this offense. We're going to build this offense around you in a way that doesn't really happen very much anymore. Just in modern football, we've talked about the leading rusher in the SEC. We don't know who it is. Ollie Gordon is one of the last true like feature backs that if he has a bad game, his team is not going to win that game. And I think that is a big, now again, that could be a problem if you're Leonard Fournette, right? But I do think that we have enough going on, especially in the new Big 12, where we don't really see these style of defenses anymore, where it's like, yeah, if you just hand the ball to Ollie Gordon, they're not going to be a lot of UCF games on there because Gus Malzahn's a little bit of a different guy. He knows how to stop that kind of guy. He's stopped those guys before. And so I think outside of that, like, he's a guy who's going to be in a conference that is a little bit defense optional. He's going to have the trust of his coach. He's going to be in another one of these situations that you're not being compared to DeMarco Murray or Adrian Peterson. You're not being compared to Barry Sanders. That was too long ago. And so point being, like, you're kind of in this zone of, he's clearly the most known running back. He's in a good situation. He's in a conference that they even appeared in the championship last game, didn't do well, but appeared in the championship game and beat Oklahoma and all that. So yeah, I think the expectations are great. I think the trust is great. And there's not a lot to choose from. This is like fantasy football, like modern fantasy football. It would take like a real franchise running back at the top, and there won't be too many left.
The relationship between Mike Gundy and Ollie Gordon going into his pre-draft season is a little bit different than the relationship of Chuba Hubbard and Mike Gundy going into his pre-draft season.
I started to make that same joke.
Yeah. Look that one up, kids.
Yep.
Okay, so the hurdle with running backs, and I do want to say some positive things about Ollie Gordon because he was fourth on my board. Like, very, very high on my board as well. Was going to take him I wasn't going to take him with my next one, but very soon he was going to come off.
Mm-hmm.
The running back climb has gotten steeper and steeper. And I talked about this with Jesse Simonson a couple months ago. We all remember 2015. Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, great race. Still a very debated finish. A lot of people thought McCaffrey should have won. A lot of people thought Derrick Henry should have won, whatever the case. It was two running backs battling for the Heisman Trophy. Since then, Bryce Love. Bryce Love is the only running back who's even gotten an invite to New York. That is 8 Heisman Trophy ceremonies, 1 running back present. We have had, more Big Ten defensive linemen get to New York than college football running backs, all right? And it's not like it's been some wasteland because Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Najee Harris, Bijan Robinson, Blake Corum, Kenneth Walker III, Travis Etienne, Chuba Hubbard, none of those guys got to New York. None of them. Speaking of Hubbard, who I already brought up, the fellow Oklahoma State running back, 2,000-yard back in 2019, right? He didn't get there to that 2,000 rushing yards mark until the bowl game. Same with 2015 McCaffrey, though obviously he had the receiving yards. He was already past 2,000 scrimmage yards. Derrick Henry was at 1,986 rushing yards pre-Heisman ceremony, and he eventually hit 2,000 in the postseason. In those 8 years that we're talking about running backs not getting to New York outside of Bryce Love, Dante Foreman hit 2,000 yards before the bowl game. But just kidding, Texas didn't get a bowl game that season because Texas was 5-7. Probably wasn't going to have the Heisman Trophy go to a running back on a 5-7 team. That stinks for Dante Foreman. That's just the way that it played out. Bryce Love finished second.
Is it Deontay Foreman? That's always
Deontay Foreman. Deontay Foreman.
Yeah.
I said Dante. My bad. Deontay. Bryce Love finished second in 2017, but he was 27 yards short of 2,000 yards pre-Heisman ceremony. Jonathan Taylor, 2018, was 11 yards short of 2,000 pre-Heisman rushing yards. Okay. Chuba Hubbard, 64 yards short of getting to 2,000 in 2019. Nobody's gotten close to it since then. But last year, the guy who was closest to it was Ollie Gordon. Led the country with 1,732 rushing yards. He had 1,614 pre-bowl game. Are we sure he's maxed out, though? Because you brought it up before, Will. He averaged 6 carries per game in their first 3 games before Mike Gundy realized they needed to build an offense around him. So much so that Gundy decided after this DUI, we're not going to dial your workload back. We're going to make you carry the ball 50 times in the season opener. If Ollie Gordon can get to 2,000 rushing yards pre-Heisman ceremony, which would probably include them getting to the Big 12 championship, maybe winning it as well, it's possible. It is possible for a player of his caliber, despite the drought, despite those hurdles.
Yeah, no, and I think part of it too is like I'm looking at their passing stats last year; they were even worse than I remembered. So yeah,
Alan Bowman is Oklahoma State fans. You get it.
Yeah, not trying to jump on it, but I'm actually kind of amazed they did as well as they did looking at how I thought their quarterback was a role player. I did not think he was a spy. So looking at this, I think that again, we're seeing some old school elements here is all I'm going to say, because there is truly no one to give this credit to on this team. So yeah, I think that's my only thing is it's just style of offense. Like I said, it's like fantasy football.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go with another guy who plays some defense. Guy who's number 2 on my board. And again, this is just we have to entertain the possibility of some of these things playing out. I'm going with Caleb Downs, the Ohio State safety, the former Alabama safety. I am not sold that Ohio State is about to turn him into a true offensive player. Okay. This is not by any stretch of the imagination a Travis Hunter situation. That is not what's playing out here. It probably isn't even a Charles Woodson situation. And I am not saying that Caleb Downs winning the Heisman should take that, because in theory, he should be able to play his position at a super high level and have a chance to win the award. I would love to say that all of those things can happen and he will be eligible in the same way any other player in college football would be. We know that Caleb Downs is awesome at playing his position because as a true freshman in the SEC, both in coverage against the run, he was awesome. And there's a reason why this guy is an All-American pretty much every publication you can find. While I do think it is obviously an uphill climb for a safety to be able to win the Heisman Trophy, maybe it's a touch different than an elite corner entering a season where you know that offenses are just going to not pick on them and they're just going to stay away from them. It's a little bit tougher to be able to stay away from a safety when obviously they have the freedom. And if you look at kind of the way that Downs, his usage broke down at Alabama, I mean, the guy played all over the place and it was kind of an even distribution. So a tough guy to kind of just say, hey, we're going to not try and have our offense revolve around whatever he's doing. What a safety like Downs, what a safety like him is capable of with the stats and the highlight reel plays, to me, I think all of that is still on the table. And I think it's on the table even if he is exclusively a generational talent at safety, which many believe he is. Here's what I wonder about, though. And here's the reason I even have him this high on my board. What part of Ryan Day wants to just try and have something like what Michigan had with Charles Woodson or like what Harbaugh had with Jabril Peppers? People forget his 2016 season. I mean, look, say what you will about him being there at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Like, did he belong amongst those other 4? Whatever the case may be, Jabril Peppers was awesome to watch that year. It really was. Even if there's just 20 offensive snaps for Caleb Downs this year, and maybe he scores 2 or 3 times, that's again, that's high. That's a very high projection for him with that usage. And if he's already having a really good year in Ohio State's defensive backfield, does that catch the attention of voters? Maybe Ohio State has like a top 2 defense, beats Michigan, wins the Big Ten. And by the way, an Ohio State quarterback is kind of taken out of the conversation because if you look at it post Troy Smith, Braxton Miller, Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud, all those guys were better than Troy Smith, who didn't deserve to win it. Darren McFadden did. Those guys haven't won the Heisman Trophy either. So maybe there's like a little bit of fatigue, but there's still an acknowledgement of like what Ohio State has done. So that's why I went with Caleb Downs in this spot. Start throw, and maybe Ryan Day will just do the thing that's been teased in this offseason.
Yeah, I love this pick. I think that the Heisman voters love a gadgety defensive player, right? I think he did a good job comparing him to Jabril Peppers. Simmons from Clemson would be another example.
Oh, yeah.
Not a certain gentleman from LSU. We are following the rules here, not comparing players to him. But point being, I think that that's a good point. It's always about the story with defensive guys. Sue is another good example. That was a story. And like I think that this is a good example. There's a guy we know. He's in the transfer portal. He was one of the few that did leave, Alabama for kind of like the greener pastures or whatever. So everyone knows his name, right? So yeah, I think that's a great pick.
And in this new era, which we understand the significance of the transfer portal, and we're not like picking to try and find faults with specific players who end up as transfers. Again, like look at the last 2 winners, Caleb Williams, Jay Daniels, both transfers. Like Joe Burrow transfer. Like we've kind of moved past whatever sort of stigma was associated. I mean, we probably moved past it with Baker, like 2017, if we're being 100% honest. Look, I think we've gotten to a different place, and we understand obviously some of the dynamics at play. So I think Caleb Downs would probably come off the board in any draft, despite the fact that he's not a primary ball carrier.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna switch gears here and hope, because my next one was gonna be kind of a throw, but I'm gonna go safe here and then go with the throw because I don't think you can do two of those in a row with like a defensive player and then another guy. So I don't think you're gonna take my next guy. So I'm gonna go just based on the chalk here of the expectations, but how we've just discovered they go the other way for this certain school. I am going to go ahead and pick. Well, here's the deal. Here's what this pick is. A guy from Ohio State, right? I don't think it's going to be Henderson because of the kind of the running back stable. We can't, pick Howard. I already did that, right? So I think I'm going to just kind of stick right there. And I'm going to go with Emeka, and his
Abuka.
last name is
Abuka.
Abuga. There we go. And
Abuka.
like
Yeah.
Abuka, yes. And so again, these guys every year there is an Ohio State wide receiver that I am led to believe is the second coming of Jerry Rice, and I can't wait to see how this is going to be him this year. I'm excited. Again, a guy who had Michael Thomas and Olave on his team with the Saints. Not a hater, just saying there has to be a player on this Ohio State team that we are fed, we are force fed, and I'm starting to see it's going to be, if it's not going to be Will Howard, who we're not even super sold on, I think it's going to be this receiver, because I think that their passing offense has to get better. And last year they won the Blitnikoff Award with a guy who had like the fourth best stats. And so I think that at the end of the day, if the expectations have been set so low that this guy can get the hype that can almost get, as far as like a Heisman invite, like can be like this banner carrier for Ohio State in a year that was objectively disappointing, I think that even without the name recognition, which I'm struggling again, I should know his name, but
Abuka. Yeah.
Abuka, yeah. And because that's the thing, they have a receiver that is disgusting every year. I'm not dumping in Ohio State. I'm sure I will see a highlight in week one and go, yep, great pick, Will. I just need to get to know him. So we're going to do that together.
Abuka is not as good as the guys that have come through that everybody knows, like
Right.
Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Like he's not one of those.
Mm-hmm.
He's great though. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's great for among college receivers. I think he's one of the better receivers in all of college football, and he has really good surroundings. And if the surroundings are better with quarterback play, if Will Howard is what they hope he's going to be, then he will benefit from an offense that, yes, is still going to run the football a ton, but is going to have to target somebody. Like
Right.
you're not going to play in these big time games and just be like, we're just going to run the football, 75 times and not throw the ball. Like they won't be able to win at will that sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting too, because I had him at 8 on my board, and I thought about, okay, what's going to make him stand out? Because he's not he doesn't have like the body control of Marvin Harrison Jr. Like some of the catches that he would make, I still the play where Marvin Harrison Jr.'s knee bent that way, I still think is photoshopped or CGI, something
Right.
like that. That just couldn't have happened. We couldn't have all witnessed that. He has that matchup to close the regular season against Will Johnson, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that College Football 25 had as the number one player in the game. If you torch a corner like that
Mm-hmm.
in a game in which Ohio State wins going away and it's this big exhale for Ryan Day, and you look at the running backs, and Henderson and Judkins have both kind of like shared the load a bit, that's kind of going to be the approach in the Chip Kelly offense, at least that's what it appears.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of look up and you're like, Ibuka kind of just went off against the guy that many were saying is like the best player, maybe the best defensive player in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty loud statement. And we're just trying to find a path for it. And you need to have little things in there like that. And the timing of that would certainly set up well.
Yeah, and like I hate to harp on this point, but it is true. Like the point that you're making about, oh yeah, Michigan, da da da. This is an Ohio State team last year that lost 3 straight to Michigan, did not win their division in the Big Ten, and they still got everything. Like they like it just, none of it mattered. Like well yeah, Harrison could have worse stats, but they got to be a better team. They got to beat Michigan. They got to do, none of it mattered. So I think that if we're in a situation where Ohio State is just a little bit better, and now people could talk themselves into this, it doesn't matter that he's not as good as any of those guys, because people have wanted to vote for this guy for 5 years, even though he kind of didn't exist.
Yeah, look, it's going to be part of the conversation. If Ohio State is nationally relevant once again with a prolific offense, yeah, they're going to have those guys that are part of the Heisman Trophy conversation. There's no doubt. Will, I think one of the two guys that I want to take here might be your dart throw. It might be. I don't really, I don't like taking this guy as high. Okay, you know what? Here's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stay in that rivalry, and I'm going to go with Donovan Edwards, the Michigan running back.
Okay, that's a good one.
we have, I think, been among the more vocal in expressing frustration that a guy who did not have 500 rushing yards last year graced the cover of a long-awaited college football video game.
Mm-hmm.
We expressed that. Okay, we're not like sitting here saying that Donovan Edwards is this established star and that was something that he had earned over others, a certain Luther Burden. But here's the thing: totally new look Michigan offense in terms of personnel. But maybe Sharon Moore just looks at this identity of what it can be. And
Mm-hmm.
says, you know what? Let's just run Donovan Edwards and Alex Orji 50 times a game. Let's just do that. Let's just do that and just try and punch people in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Michigan has this don't count us out type season where they go 11-1, kind of come out of nowhere. They beat Ohio State. They beat the cheating allegations that are going to just follow them as long as they're in existence with this coaching staff, or at least some remnants of it. And maybe they just have one of those years. Because remember, Sharon Moore is the same guy that went to Penn State and looked James Franklin in the eye and said, buddy, I don't care what you got on defense. I'm running it down your throat 32 consecutive times to be able to win this game. He's the type
The LeBron cigarette meme. Look, the Vikings may think this is a franchise quarterback, but I don't.
Yeah, exactly. Like he doesn't care. And if he feels like he has that advantage, he's not going to try and be cute or anything like that. We've seen that from Sharon Moore as a play caller. So who knows? Maybe Michigan, a team that's kind of searching for those answers on offense, kind of lacking that offensive firepower outside of, a Colston Loveland at tight end, who's going to be one of the better returning tight ends in all of college football. And maybe Edwards can have some 150-yard game against Ohio State, and he's the backbone of a playoff team that goes 11-1 and at least gets to the Big Ten championship or something like that. But again, the mark to remember, 2,000 rushing yards pre-Heisman. That's going to be the key, I think, for a lot of these running backs moving forward as to whether or not they're going to be at the forefront of these conversations.
Yeah, I'm going to add to this point. I love this pick. This is actually just a debate. This might be the pick of the draft so far. And here's a stat. I started to bring this up earlier, but it didn't really apply because it was almost a negative stat for the guy I was talking about. But I'll bring it up here. So Ollie Gordon led the nation in rushing yards last year, and he was second in touchdowns to Blake Corum. Because what this box score looks like is just I'm playing NCAA on rookie cheese, and I'm just going to hand it to this one guy on the 1 yard line 100 times. Blake Corum had 27 rushing touchdowns and 500 fewer yards than Ollie Gordon last year. It sounds like they just got to the red zone against bad teams and just handed him touchdowns. And if they do that with Donovan Edwards, this guy's going to New York. Like, it's over.
Yeah, he'll be a huge part of Michigan, moving on to this new era. And again, this is more of a projection, obviously, than based on past production. But if he is able to scoop up a lot of that Blake Corum work, then he's going to be set up for a monster season.
Yeah, I fully agree. All right, now this guy was my throw, right? And then what I was going to say is that you're not going to take two defensive players in a row. I know that. Harold Perkins.
Harold Perkins was on my board. He was on my board and thought about how high up he should be. And I think I settled with him. Where did I settle? I settled with him at number 9 on my board. So there was a chance. There was definitely a chance he was going to get drafted. I'm surprised to see that you have him not as your last pick here, but there's definitely a case.
Well, I'll tell you why, right? Because all these defensive guys are narrative driven, like we talked about, right? Now, we've talked about this high standard for LSU receivers. Well, one thing that we've really zeroed in on is like just narrative conversation as we've kind of assimilated these new teams, new playoff, everyone, we can kind of see what was really going on because of the amount of data we have, right? So here's what I could say. Everyone's aware of how horrible LSU's defense was, right? So you're going to be comparing him to himself from last year, okay? So just in the same way that Harold Perkins was compared to his freshman year in his second year, and it was a wild disappointment, for which 0 people blamed him. 0. If you think Harold Perkins' season last year was his fault, you kind of just don't know ball, because it was the fact that he was being lined up at corner. And so what this is going to be is a guy who has found a way to step out of the national conversation by not his own fault. He was not injured. He was just in a bum coaching staff, right? And now it's going to be the story of the resurgent LSU defense under Blake Baker, led by Harold Perkins. Oh, they robbed us of this guy last season. And I could already see it happening because the amount of blitzes they bring, he'll probably statistically have his best season, even if LSU has a bad defense, because the corners are the problem. And Blake Baker does not care how bad the corners are. He's going to be sending Harold Perkins, not sticking him in coverage. So I think even if LSU has a middle of the pack defense that is objectively not that good, and Harold Perkins finishes with like 14 sacks because he's just being sit on every play, and like quarterbacks are like freaking out, calling stuff at the line. That's another thing about these defensive guys. We talked about Heisman moments. He had 4 or 5 of those in his freshman season. Just not knowing, just see ball, get ball, real life Bobby Boucher. I don't know what the cover 3 is. There's the quarterback, right? So now he has a year of rage of having to learn how to cover that he didn't need to know how to do. So I don't think he's a liability in coverage. We saw him get a game-changing pick in coverage against Luther Burden last year. We saw him jump out of the gym and like Odell snag a pick. So I think his coverage abilities got better despite that not being a good thing he needed to do. And so it's like you're not going to see this knock of him of, oh, well, like, well, yeah, he's just a guy that gets after the quarterback. He's going to do enough in coverage where he could get a couple of turnovers that way, strip a couple of guys after they, catch the ball, break up a couple of passes. Harold Perkins doing like the incompletion is going to be cool. Get a couple of those on the highlight reel. But then what you're really going to see is the fear quarterbacks feel when they see Harold Perkins and how he's going to affect games, because he's going to be coming every play. He's going to be coming towards like on a blitz, and the quarterbacks are going to need to account for him on every play. So it's going to be this chess game of every quarterback being like, okay, there's Harold Perkins right there. How are we going to stop him? Because I think he's just going to be used as a battering ram as he was intended. So I think as far as the name recognition, it's there. He is not, we've not talked about him too much. I think that it was kind of missing last year. But he has the potential to go, will you save this defense? Where in reality, it was just stupidity that ruined it last year.
He's going to have to stuff the stat sheet probably to get that type of consideration when we know the history of linebacker winning the Heisman Trophy. The last one to have even a halfway shot, Manti Te'o, was runner-up 2012. And a lot of that was narrative driven.
It was his coach.
It's a good point, Will. It's a good point. You never know.
Brian Kelly will make up a fake girlfriend for Harold Perkins. You heard it here first, right? If that gets him more defensive recruits, he's ready to do it.
That was the best of the untold Netflix docs so far, was the Manti Te'o stuff. Like people forget, everybody's saying like, Swamp King's disappointing. The Manziel one could have been better. The Manti Te'o one was really good. It definitely was. We need to see him take this to a different level than he's been at any point of his career. Like even beyond just the flashes that we saw his true freshman season. It's putting all of it together. It's filling up the stat sheet, not just with sacks, but you need the TFLs, you need the interceptions, forced fumbles, all that stuff. Like maybe Brian Kelly listens to him and puts him in at tailback, just like he did in the bowl game. Perkins wants to do that. I don't really think that should matter. But here's the most depressing thing that I could present for a linebacker trying to win the Heisman Trophy. Will Anderson, playing that jack linebacker, so it's more of an edge, whatever. The man had 34 and a half TFLs for a playoff-bound Alabama and didn't even get to New York. Now, obviously, he has the Alabama standard that's raising the bar unbelievably high, and that's different than what LSU, whatever sort of standard is in Death Valley going into this season with the LSU defense. So I fully acknowledge that. But, man, we like to just, for whatever reason, find these flaws. Oh, there's already a defensive player going. Aiden Hutchinson's already going to be – we don't need to send another defensive player there. So, like, there's those weird things that somehow impact the psyche of a Heisman campaign, but I'm here for it. I mean, I put him on my board for a reason. If there's ever a linebacker that could do it, I think Harold Perkins is the guy.
Yeah, I think, that's the thing, is that you have to be a defensive guy who doesn't really play a position unless you are some type of, like Aiden Hutchinson's stats weren't awesome, just to be honest with you. Relator said better stats every year. It was just a new thing, like we were talking about. So I think that's the key is, maybe you get him a couple of tailback looks. Maybe you get him because he's like an edge rusher, right? He's like this kind of like weird hybrid. We can go back to Jabril Peppers, where you're getting more of these sacks. Sacks are big, loud things versus like it would take, like we're talking about like downs, like I feel like he would need to have 5, 6, 7 interceptions to account for, and those are just harder to get than just Harold Perkins running free at the quarterback and you don't think about him for a split second, he's in the backfield. So I think that's part of it, is getting, like, people love the intrigue. We talk about Travis Hunter too. They love the intrigue of, this guy can play anywhere, we're going to put him anywhere, even if that doesn't even really happen. Seeing a guy and thinking he's not, because you're right, they don't vote for linebackers, they want to vote for defensive players. Like, this guy does it all. So I think he has the element of possibly doing that.
Yeah, like if he has double-digit sacks and he has like 4 or 5 interceptions, a couple of touchdowns that he returns or something like that, LSU's in the playoff, like these things are possible to get you in that conversation, but pushing you over the hump to be able to say you're the best player in all of college football and more than enough people agree on that, that's obviously the tougher thing standing in this way. Okay, this will be my 4th pick You're gonna have one more pick after this.
Thank
I
you.
don't think this guy is on your board.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Trey Harris.
He
I
was
love.
next on my board.
Was he really? No. Okay, so I was right. I read you. I knew it. Okay.
The old double fake.
I'm glad we're having a conversation about this because I don't know if I've talked about this enough. I've kind of just praised the Ole Miss passing game and Lane and all the different things that we feel are possible for Ole Miss in this season. But to focus on Harris, I am such a big believer. I think you can make the case that he's one of the best four receivers returning in the sport, behind Burden, behind T-Mac. And then I think it gets really debatable with guys like Tez Johnson and Restrepo at Miami. Like you can kind of pick your poison there once you get outside of that initial group. Harris had 3 touchdowns in the first 3 minutes and 15 seconds of his debut for Ole Miss. I get it. It was against Mercer. I understand that. He had 5 touchdown catches in his first 5 quarters before he got hurt against Tulane last year. In those first 4 games that Ole Miss played, he played a total of 46 snaps. And still nearly had 1,000 yards, had these moments that were just unbelievable. And remember, that's a guy coming over from Louisiana Tech. He's playing in a new system. He's got to get on the same page as a new quarterback. A lot of mouths to feed in that offense. He still ends up having 4 games with 130 receiving yards, including the 213-yard game that he had against Texas A&M, when he made, I kid you not, one of the best catches I've ever seen at any level of football. I mean, just one of those plays that just goes, whoa. And if you do that in a meaningful game, Heisman moment, that obviously is on the table. There's something with a receiver winning the Heisman Trophy that I think we don't really process, but we acknowledge. You are either unguardable or your plays are loud, right? Those can be 2 of the same, and you can be both of those things. Randy Moss is obviously a great example of that kind of comes to mind. I thought Devontae Smith was more of the unguardable than he was your plays are loud. Obviously, splash plays galore, but it was just you're just not guardable, and there's just nothing you can really do. It's not necessarily mossing a dude or doing the one-hand Odell type catches, all that stuff. I think Elijah Moore was a little bit of that, though. As much as I loved Elijah Moore, I don't think his catch radius, the highlight reel plays, were at Harris's level. I really don't, and he had a great 2020 season, but I think Harris still has another step to take to show that he's unguardable. I wonder if in that rematch against Georgia, with perhaps Georgia fans, don't get mad at me saying this. I've already got you picking. I've already got you picked to win the national championship, so I'm not digging you too badly here. But with some of the questions that could be on the table at corner, maybe he can turn some heads in a game like that. I think there's a chance that because of how deep Ole Miss is at receiver, pass catcher as a whole, let's include Caden Prescorn in that conversation. I think he could have 2 of those games where like he's only got 40 receiving yards and he kind of falls off of that pace from a yardage standpoint. But if Ole Miss is playoff bound, maybe Jackson Dart gets hurt, misses a game or 2 or something like that, and that kind of ends his Heisman campaign. And Harris just still looks awesome in relief with a certain very notable Heisman candidate, Walker Howard, out there. Maybe that just makes the case for Trey Harris. So don't sleep on that. I think he's being slept on a little bit nationally.
Man, yeah, I just love this pick. I think we've talked about him like to an extent, which is that, I mean, Ole Miss, again, is kind of in a similar position, right? Where it's like, but they're also the fun team that people like. And like, that's the thing. It's like, we compare them to Mizzou, right? Because it's like, yeah, these are the first time, these are the best that these teams have been pretty much since we have started here. The Mizzou stuff can get a little bit tricky, but like offensively, they weren't all that, shout out Matty Mock. But like in terms of this is new, right? And so I think that the amount of headlines that, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss are able to generate, I think they're always going to be crushing on social. I think they're always going to be, like you said, loud. I think everything Lane Kiffin has done has been loud, and especially when they're winning. So yeah, I think that whenever you look at this team, right, it's like we've seen Jackson Dart, and I don't really think he profiles as like a Heisman type guy. I just something like there's just too much data. Like that's the other part of it, is that he would have to so clearly change the narrative about him to make him into a guy that's like, oh, this guy's like almost like Joe Burrow style, where it's like, oh, this guy's completely different this year, which is hard to predict when Lane Kiffin has all these different offensive weapons, and he can kind of get that tag too. It's like, well, he's just throwing to the open guy. Whereas to your point, yeah, I think Harris is going to be the most open guy the most of the time, and I think the way he's going to get open is going to be awesome.
Yes, Like if somebody was leaving him off first team All SEC going into the season, I would very much push back on that. Again, I'll still take Luther Burden ahead of him, but man, Trey Harris is not that far behind. He's really not. I thought he got slighted in the the video game rankings. He was like 81st or something like that. I'm like, nah, there's too many guys that are being given love ahead of him. So I'm glad that he came off the board. Will, my board is really thinned out. I've only got 2 guys left on my board here. This will be your last pick. I'm very curious if you're going to take one of these 2 guys.
So I'm furious because you took 2 of my guys in a row. So I'm now going to have to do a little bit. See, you're right. I should have assumed you were not thinking you would get Harold Perkins and not get greedy and get him up there. However, here's my flyer. I feel pretty solid about it. Zachariah Branch.
It's a good pick. It's a good pick. And I did not have him on my board when I probably should have. And I thought about it for a bit. And his path is Desmond Howard-ish, right? Is that kind of what we're thinking? Like that's special teams plays are going to have to be loud. Going to have to be a big part of that. Like he was the week 0 Heisman winner as far as I'm concerned last year. Great start. Branch is a very intriguing player that has all that viral ability.
Yeah, this is a classic. Will, why are you doing this? This will only bring you pain. But I think he could be a guy that goes off against LSU, and I think he could be a guy that stays hot. I think that if you kind of look at how this team was built last year, obviously, they have kind of like the change at quarterback. Things are shifting, and this is a guy who was, the number 7 recruit in America according to 24/7 Sports. So he's going to already have that name recognition, and we already know him for his speed and for his impact plays. And with that type of guy, especially in like a Lincoln Riley offense, he's going to find a way to get that guy open, right? And so I think that as when you have that kind of trust as a freshman already off rip, and you can see, like we said, you don't have that leadership at quarterback as much anymore. You don't have like the veterans and the guys, and you're going into the Big Ten, and you want to. It's like, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Well, with Caleb Williams, you don't need that. That just straight up, that guy will find a way to do what he's going to do. So it's not like, it's just like, here you go, Caleb. Win or lose, you're going to go do what you're going to do. It's not like I got to scheme someone. If Lincoln Riley is in, Caleb Williams' ear, like, go do this, he's probably like, all right, we'll see. And so, like, I think that, like, we have, especially at that level, or like in the NFL, it's going to be a little bit different because, like, there's more structure to it. But I think that when you need to get an offense going, and we've seen that be kind of an issue for Lincoln Riley at times, this is a guy who could just be like a microwave style scorer, like basketball style. And when you think about, to your point, you're going to get those extra reps on special teams, those are always loud. If you can get a touchdown or 2, like, that's the thing people forget about, like Patrick Peterson's a great example, like hitting the Heisman pose. It's like he had a couple of touchdowns, but those touchdowns are often few and far between for these guys that are on special teams. But all you need is the 1 or 2, and he's already kind of proven that he has that level of ability. And if you can kind of, it goes to who you're preparing for against USC. Well, last year it was all kinds of stuff. This year it's like, yeah, the defense is going to be kind of scouting this guy whenever he's on the field. He has a little bit of the Nick Harbor in him, where it's like when you see him, you always got to be aware over the top. You always got to be aware that he can't just cook you, because 1 or 2 plays out of him, he doesn't need to average 10 receptions a game a la Devontae Smith to make the same impact. Like, so he can flip it in 2 or 3 catches. He can flip it in 1 special teams play and stay in the news cycle against, like I said, not going to harbor this because I've already, or not harbor, but I'm not going to harp on this because I've talked about it enough, but those your DBs are not looking great. So that's the exact kind of guy that a guy falls down. Special teams we're still not super certain about. Guy falls down, suddenly you got a 100-yard day. I like exactly what happened in week 1 last year with Keon Coleman and his breakout party. So point being, like, I've already seen it. I've already seen it with DBs that I felt even better about going into last year. So I think he probably starts off hot week 1 and it gets people on the national. We all watch Brian Kelly on Sundays. And then from there, it just kind of like slowly snowballs.
What a great emotional hedge this is by you. It's truly masterful. When you're sitting there on Sunday night watching this LSU secondary just let up touchdown after touchdown, and Zachariah Branch, you look up, he's just got 3 touchdowns. You're like, oh my God, why did I not pick this guy with Heisman Trophy?
Listen, last year I was hyping up Deuce Chestnut and yelling DBU. I can't get worse than that. So now I got to take it back a step, use the logical brain. And hey, if LSU wins, exciting times. Won't be sad about that.
If Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson had gotten to play every single game against the LSU secondary, would they have fought for the Heisman Trophy?
Yes.
Very possible.
I'm here to tell you right now.
Yeah. All right, let's. I have 2 guys that I can end this with. I thought about putting Branch on my big board, and I decided not to. I'm going running back for this last one because I could go with T-Mac. I'm not going to go with T-Mac. despite the fact that Noah Fifita is my guy. Just too many of the moving parts there. Don't know necessarily that he's got that upside this year with all the questions we kind of have about Arizona and this new offense. But let's go. You know what? I'm going to go with Jaden Blue. And I know that he is not built like CJ Baxter. He's not. He's not going to run through contact. I don't think he's going to be as successful as I think CJ Baxter would have been. And again, I had the option to pick him as leading rusher in the SEC. Didn't necessarily do that. I pivoted to Marcus Carroll. I do think that there is a possibility that Sark goes, you know what, man? I know our depth's not there. I'm just going to do whatever I can. And if he tells me that he can't handle these 25 carries a game, if it's mid-October and he's like, Coach, you got to dial it back a little bit, then I'll do it. But until he tells me that, I'm just going to keep the foot on the gas and go because their depth is lacking. They're going to get creative. They're going to have, I know they've already talked about potentially like moving receivers there just to make sure that you have bodies at those spots. But look, with that offensive line, with that scheme, the eyes that'll be on Ewers in the passing game with the additions that they've had there at the receiver spots, I do think that he should be poised for a big year. And if Sark decides to just go all in with it, and all of a sudden Jaden Blue pops up and is like, whoa, maybe this guy should have been getting a lot more work, and we're seeing what he can do now that he's getting 20 touches a game or something like that. You really feel him at the end of these games. Who knows? Maybe that could be on the table for somebody like him. So, yeah, again, another one of these guys that just like with Donovan Edwards, massive projection here that we're talking about here, okay? Like, I'm not trying to disrespect like a Taj Brooks or, because Taj Brooks was the Texas Tech running back was the other guy that I was considering. But like kind of wonder a little bit more about him with the running backs that have the high profile on them coming into this year. And again, for like a Texas Tech team that I don't think is going to be, competing for a college football playoff spot, I think that'd be a little bit tougher. But yeah, I'll go with Jaden Blue somewhat reluctantly, despite the fact that I know what's working in his favor because I feel like I've been talking about it for the last like 2 weeks.
How much do you think Sark is regretting telling Quinn Ewers to lose all that weight?
To just be like, Quinn, you want to actually beef up to 240 and see if we can turn you into like Colin Klein or something like that?
We actually need you to run the read option, brother. We don't have any more running backs. I don't know what to tell you. You better hit the old Whataburger down on campus and start beefing up because we don't have the backs. Yeah, I think my only hesitance here is like I was sure you were going to go Carroll here because I feel like you already kind of explained why Carroll is in a good situation. I think this is a little bit of a lack of a situation. So yeah, I am interested by it. I just think that Sark and kind of knowing Sark is probably just going to try to hit the open guy like we've been talking about. In that like. Yeah, I think he was more likely to get creative than to turn kind of like his second or third guy. And of course, he's going to tell you, oh, this guy was right there with Baxter. Like, I get it. But I don't think, so I think he's more likely to rotate guys in or get something rather than just be like, oh, see if you can be that. So, yeah, I'm interested by it. I think it's a good logical pick. I'm like I said, I'm shocked you didn't get Carroll.
I didn't go with Carroll because, what did Trader finish 8th last year?
Good point.
8th, and that was an awesome season.
Yeah,
a really, really good season. And with the Mizzou running backs, you're just going to be like, well, we've already seen all these different guys do it. Unless you're going to run for 2,000 yards or something like that, then
that's a really good point.
So that's why I didn't go with that direction. And I guess you can make the same point as well for Texas. We're going to be like, is Jaden Blue really better than Bijan Robinson? Like what? what are we trying to show here? Like, but maybe the fact that we're all talking about the lack of depth here, and it's this thing that Texas is able to overcome because of Jaden Blue just being awesome, and maybe that's kind of the storyline path for him.
That's actually pretty funny because you are making a good point, which is that I think Heisman voters are informed enough to just be like, this is just Larry Roundtree with a mustache on.
Is that Tyler Beatty lined up over there?
Yeah, is that Tyler Beatty? Because Schrader, good point. He had the best story and the best stats you could ever have, and it just didn't. Yeah, good point. Actually, he's not going to do better than 8th because that would have to make him like save a child from a burning building and have the best stats we've ever seen at Mizzou, which is hard to do.
Yeah, Drink made him run backwards actually in the final month of the season, just to see if he could do it. But other than that, no, that probably won't work in his favor as much. All right, so that means our draft is concluded. You went with Luther Burden, Ollie Gordon II, Emeka Ibuka, Harold Perkins Jr., and Zachariah Branch. I went with Travis Hunter, Caleb Downs, Donovan Edwards, Trey Harris, Jaden Blue. We will put the poll out. I will leave it out there for more than 24 hours. I promise. Was there anybody else that we probably should have included? I already talked about T-Mac. I talked about Taj Brooks. Probably plenty of others for honorable mention that would make a lot of sense. I'm sure Georgia fans are like, why no Trevor Etienne? Kind of already talked about the lack of like true feature backed if you're going to break through, and why I don't think Etienne will quite get that type of workload. Yeah, it's kind of weird to not mention a non quarterback from Bama as part of this conversation as well.
Because that's like every player that's not been a quarterback that's won in our lives is just a Bama player at a random position.
Yeah, it's like Justice Haynes. Like, is that the guy? Is that the guy that we're talking about here? So
we're gonna end up at a highlight, aren't we? We just have been talking about these Bama guys. Like, I don't know, Jam Miller.
I like Jeremy Bernard. I do. Yeah, Jam Miller's gonna be great. We'll see. But yeah, okay. I think.
Wait, one thing we haven't talked about today, but we have talked about it. We had a whole episode of this, which will remind everyone: tight ends do not win this award. So, like, we it's just not worth. If Brock Bowers was not getting it, brother, you think it'd be better than him and Kyle? Gosh, why can't I think of it?
Kyle Pitts.
Yep, and Kyle Pitts. Like, those are like two of the best SEC tight ends and national tight ends we've ever seen, and they just were not in the conversation for the Heisman. So, what would you have to do? Again, would you have to play some quarterback? Would you have to be Taysom Hill? Not even worth discussing. So, yeah, we did not forget tight ends. I think we both just were like, we've already talked about this.
Yeah, Brock Bowers was the best tight end in college football history and never finished in the top 10 of the Heisman voting. So, and
he ran the ball,
like. He did everything. He did everything possible. I still think freshman year, if you kind of go back, especially after Wade did the SEC championship and a loss against Bama, oh my God, the plays that he was making in that game. But yeah, that's exactly right. Tight end is just not been discussed. Who knows? Maybe this year will be this will be different, but it's hard to imagine after the career of Bowers kind of came and went. All right, let's get to a quick YouTube ad. I want to tell you all about our YouTube channel. We're doing a lot of different things with it this season before we get to that of the week. If you are listening to this just in podcast form and you are not watching us, well, first of all, thank you. But you are missing out on all the great content that we have on the Saturday Down South YouTube channel. Every single episode, as I always say at the end of every pod, is on the Saturday Down South YouTube channel. We have all of our interviews there. I always tell people, maybe you like to just listen to the interviews, or maybe you like to just listen to part one, or maybe you like to just see me rant about fall weddings. Whatever the case may be, we have all of that content up on our Saturday Down South YouTube channel. We also have shorts that we put together from specific interviews. If you're one of those people that just likes to be able to get your content in little bits, we have that as well. You can search that tab on YouTube and find all of our great content. We have so many different things that we're going to be doing during this college football season. Guys, I don't know if you heard, college football is here. It's a great time to be able to just hit that subscribe button on Saturday Down South YouTube. Go do it right now. All right, Will, let's close with some lad of the week. I'll start us off. I am going to go with SEC legend Colt McCoy. Who could forget SEC legend?
We can claim him now. That's the Big Ten rule.
It's so weird. ACC rule. I mean, ACC's claiming Katie Ledecky. Just why do we have to do that? Just very, very unnecessary. He announced his retirement from the NFL, age 37. He's actually going to be 38 in a couple of weeks. He is now joining the broadcast booth on NBC doing Big Ten games. All right, I think he's doing more studio work for Big Ten games for their countdown stuff. It was funny, like ESPN. I read the ESPN story on Colt McCoy, like getting into broadcasting, and they put in like the 7th graph that it was going to be for NBC. It's like, oh, okay, I guess. You didn't want to put that in the lead. Didn't want to make sure that, didn't want to have NBC that close to the top there. But yeah, Colt McCoy, 13 years in the NFL, didn't get signed this past season. 0% chance that I would have said in 2010 that guy is going to play into his late 30s. Just remarkable to think about that. Because obviously his college career was extremely successful, and people forget that Texas would have won a national championship if he had been able to stay healthy in the second half against Bama, playing catch with his dad, all those things. Not really, but whatever helps people sleep at night. His career earnings in the NFL. Do you have any guesses?
Man, I mean, he's a quarterback, man. So they're at least making like a couple mil a year, and it's over like 10. I'm gonna say like let's call it 50.
Oh, no, not 50. 50 would
Okay.
be crazy. Even Chase Daniel was at like 41, I
Okay.
think. And he's like the most like lucrative backup who never really broke through quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Second Chase Daniel mentioned on the pod. He's better than solid in his college career, in my opinion, but that's just
Yeah.
me. Second guess.
Let's go 25.
Go 26.
Boom,
26.
there you go.
I was going to say go with your initial logic because 13 years at like you're talking about like a couple mil a year. Yeah, like just over 26 million a year according to Sport Track. Awesome life. What an awesome life Colt McCoy had. 21 of his 36 career NFL starts came in his first 2 seasons. And after that, 2021 with the Cardinals was the only time that he won multiple starts in a season. I mean, that's the life right there. It really now he gets to do the studio gig, which he's not going to have to worry about getting called out for bias. Like if he had done like the ESPN thing and he's talking about Texas games and stuff, like you got to dodge that. You kind of just like do his thing now. And the studio gig is a great life. If you can get that kind of work, I cannot recommend it enough based on everything that I've seen and heard from people that do it. So yeah, good for Colt, SEC legend.
And I'll say this. The thing that always separates those guys like in earnings too is sometimes those guys, and this is a Bear fan, sometimes backups will be brought in as starters for like a year or two, and those contracts are like the Nick Foles contract was like massive, even though that guy's like technically a backup, was a starter at point. So yeah, that's the thing is like sometimes you'll get like 1 or 2 random off years, like Geno Smith is a great example. It's like, oh, that guy just got a starter extension. But yeah, that's an amazing life, and the way that dude personified Texas and kind of got to be like a mini Herschel Walker for Texas for like 20 years, where it was like, you were the last time we were good. I think it's pretty cool now to see Texas go to the SEC, claim as an SEC legend, and now it's kind of like his watch has ended. Like Texas is kind of back, and so he just gets to ride off into his horse, his Colt, into the sunset.
If SEC Network didn't do a Colt McCoy's best 10 moments video on social media, you missed the mark. Okay, get on top of that, SEC Network social.
Well, you got to break into the Longhorn Network vault for that one. So
that was before. No. Colt preceded the Longhorn Network. Let's not forget that is strictly after his time. He had none of his actual live games broadcast on the Longhorn Network.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was all based on that. But yeah, that's it's super cool. Like he's always been, like you said, good dude, good, super fun to watch him play when he has played. He was great at Texas. So I do have. Before we get to football season, I have one more Olympic one because this was such a great all-time Olympics. And this, to me, would be remiss if we didn't mention this. And now that it's about 8 days ago, but really the conversation took off over this week. Australian breakdancer, legend, Ray Gunn.
What a queen Ray Gunn is. For those who have ever wanted to just fake it until you make it in your line of work, Ray Gunn is just the perfect embodiment of this. The American dream in Australia.
Yes. So there have been, don't worry. This is the exact kind of, logic hole that I like to go into, a little wormhole in the internet. I got you guys covered, right? So we have missed an entire scandal. So let me just take a step back. Breakdancing was introduced into the Olympics for this year and this year only. It was already planned that it was not going to LA before this, okay? So the performance of one Ray Gunn did not affect this, but there is a 36-year-old professor with a PhD in cultural studies from Australia who's all of her academic works are on breakdancing. Now, breakdancing was started in New York City by, the African-American and Latino cultures there, very far from Australia. And so this person has a doctorate functionally in breakdancing and is 36 years old. And we got to see her represent her country in a way that
represented well.
Represented it well. Made the news. Was the focus of Australian sport.
A big hit.
Yeah, big hit. Yeah, big numbers. The Olympics has now kind of gone to the trouble of like scrubbing all of the video of her, but she basically showed up and did how I feel like I think Ray Gunn dancing at the Olympics and Connor dancing at a wedding, I think could kind of go blow for blow. I think that you are as good as her, as she is as a PhD in dancing, because you stick with your fundamentals, right? I think where your bread is buttered. You're going to hit a two-step. You're going to hit a little electric slide, a little cha-cha slide, get up out of there, right? She decided to invent new dance moves without really hitting the dance moves that she was supposed to hit. So there was a whole scandal that said, oh, this is all made up, right? By the media doesn't want Ray Gunn to succeed. They were saying, oh, her husband was on the committee. They were saying that her way of getting there was fraudulent. I don't think that's the case. I think that this is a little bit of, you see an undefeated Western Michigan team make a New Year's Six bowl game and they just get blown out. I think that was pretty similar to what it was. He was the person who kind of got the all achievement award in getting to represent Australia after doing work to get it popularized in Australia. But boy, did she get cooked. I mean, she just got cooked out of her shoes. And like I said, she kind of it was the fact that she invented like the kangaroo move. I think it was very, it was a moment. And I think that, like I said, if she had gone in and had the technical precision of some of these other dancers and done that stuff, it wouldn't have been that bad. But I went ahead and watched, I did the research of watching the final of the men's breakdancing thing. Oh my goodness, spin that 8 minutes. It is one of the most crazy athletic feats. Like the speeds, it's like watching Derrick Henry and watching like a random Sunbelt running back. If you compare that to Ray Gunn, it's like the two guys that were men were both like achieving at such a high level. And the gentleman that won, I won't spoil if you haven't seen it, but the moves he was like breaking in the corner while the other guy was going.
I won't spoil it.
Yeah, listen, it's worth it. You got to see it, man, because the way they hype it up, like so. Point being, yeah, it's so that event was great, but I just want to just limit the rumors here. We're not doing a Ring on Attack podcast because this is what social media is about. She didn't ruin the sport of breakdancing. She's not some fraud. She's just not great at breakdancing, and I think we all, of course, were like, well, this has got to be an injustice. I think it's just someone who went undefeated through the Sun Belt and then just ended up against angry Nick Saban in a bowl game.
Look, if you've seen the first hour of Cool Runnings, you know that all Ray Gunn needed was to find her John Candy. She never got her John Candy. And it played out the way that it did. If that Jamaican bobsled team had never been able to get the right coach in place, they would have been an embarrassment. And they would have been a viral sensation in the early 90s that would have lived. I think it was early 90s, was it? Yeah, I think it was, probably. At least that's when the movie was made. And we would still be talking about it. But instead, they had a great triumphant ending. Maybe this is just the beginning of Ray Gunn's story, and she will find the exact right teacher to be able to execute every move that she aspires to land.
What if she comes back as the coach of the team the next time, and she's that person? Like she's that gritty, like
Yes.
like I think she's like the Steve Kerr of breakdancing. It's
Sure.
like, wait, I was solid as a player, but as a coach, I'm going to take you to the promised land because I know the struggles you go through, and the cameras will be focused on me. So I think that actually might be it.
I'd watch that movie.
Yeah,
I would. Disney, get the rights to it. Definitely make sure you get the footage that's been scrubbed off the internet that nobody can get to. And then, let's talk. That's a movie that would be worth 2 hours of my time. Maybe an hour and a half. Yes.
And NBC, please don't come after us. We've already hyped up Colt McCoy. We're pro NBC. I was locked into the Olympics, been hyping y'all up all week. So just looking forward to the next one, guys.
Very much. Very much. All right. We have football this week. We will have, I think we're going to do like burning questions for week 1 later in the week. So we'll do a little peek ahead to week 1, despite the fact that these games in week 0, not necessarily games that we're going to be digging into very much. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Set Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.